The digital clock on my phone read 10:23 p.m. as I hurried down the dimly lit streets of Boston, clutching my purse against the October chill. My shift at the corner cafe had run late, and the manager's reluctance to call me a taxi meant I was walking the 8 blocks to my tiny apartment alone. I felt them before I saw them. The subtle shift in the air, the weight of unfamiliar gazes tracking my movements from the shadows between streetlights. When I quickened my pace, the footsteps behind me accelerated in perfect, menacing synchrony. They moved with practiced efficiency, 3 men in dark clothing materializing from different directions, cutting off any escape route. "Don't scream," the tallest one warned, pressing something hard against my side that I instinctively knew was an object. "My name is Charlotte Hayes. I'm 19 years old, and I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. If you're watching this now, please hit subscribe and leave a comment telling me where you're following from. It helps me feel less alone knowing others understand what I went through." The black SUV appeared silently at the curb, its engine barely a whisper in the deserted street. One moment I was walking home, the next I was being forced into the back seat, a cloth bag pulled roughly over my head as the vehicle accelerated smoothly into the night. "Please," I managed through the suffocating fabric. "My father's been dead for 2 years. Whatever he owed you, I don't have it." The only response was cruel laughter and a warning to keep quiet, unless I wanted things to get worse. Questions raced through my mind as we drove. How had they found me? What debts could my professor father have possibly accumulated? Why now, after all this time? The university had covered his funeral expenses when cancer took him, leaving me with nothing but student loans and fading memories. I tried to track our route through the bag, counting turns and estimating time, but disorientation set in quickly. When the vehicle finally stopped, rough hands dragged me out and across what felt like a concrete floor. "Charlotte Hayes," a new voice said, accented and cold as ice. "You look remarkably like your mother." The speaker stepped forward, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit that contrasted sharply with our industrial surroundings. They zip-tied my hands to a metal chair bolted to the floor, the plastic cutting painfully into my wrists. "Your father borrowed money from some very important people," the suit explained, pacing a slow circle around me. The number hit me like a physical blow. Impossible. Unimaginable. "That's insane," I whispered, my voice cracking with fear. "My father was a literature professor who drove a 15-year-old Volvo. He didn't have that kind of money." His smile never reached his eyes as he leaned down, his cologne suffocating in its intensity. "Then I suggest you start thinking about how you're going to be useful to us in other ways. We'll be making some calls tomorrow." They left me alone after that initial interrogation, secured to the chair in a corner of the warehouse with only the distant sounds of my captors for company. The building was cavernous, with high windows that let in slivers of moonlight, but offered no chance of escape. Hours passed in a haze of fear and disbelief. How could my quiet, bookish father have been involved with people like this? The man who'd read me poetry before bed and cried during sad movies seemed fundamentally incompatible with the kind of debt that got your daughter kidnapped. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight streaming through dirty windows and the suit returning with a phone. "Time to make some calls," he announced, scrolling through my contacts. "Who do you think values you most? That roommate of yours?" "They don't have money," I said quickly, panic rising at the thought of them being dragged into this nightmare. "Ethan's a graduate student and Melissa works at the same cafe I do. Please, there must be some mistake about my father." Melissa's sleepy voice answered on the 4th ring, confused by the early call. "Charlotte? Are you okay? You never came home last night and—" The suit nodded to one of his men, who yanked my hair hard enough to make me cry out in pain. "Your friend owes us money," the suit interrupted smoothly. $2 million by tomorrow night, or you'll never see her again, at least not in one piece." He detailed the ransom drop location with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this many times before. Similar calls were made to Ethan and my academic advisor, each one more humiliating than the last, as I was forced to plead for help I knew they couldn't provide. The suit seemed to enjoy my distress, watching with the detached interest of a scientist observing a lab specimen. Throughout the day, I began noticing subtle patterns, guard rotations, the location of exits, moments when attention wavered. A slim chance at escape began forming in my mind, fueled by the certainty that no ransom would ever materialize. When night fell again, they moved me to a small office at the back of the warehouse, securing me to a different chair with a slightly longer restraint. One guard remained, seated by the door with his attention split between me and his phone. I feigned sleep until his vigilance relaxed, his scrolling becoming more engrossed, his posture slackening minutely. With excruciating slowness, I worked my wrists against the zip ties, using techniques I'd once seen in a self-defense class. Just as the restraint began to give way, the warehouse erupted in chaos. Gunfire and shouting echoed through the cavernous space, followed by the thunderous impact of what sounded like an explosion. My guard leapt to his feet, drawing his weapon and moving toward the door. I lunged for the small letter opener I'd spotted on the desk, slicing through the weakened zip tie in one desperate motion. The guard turned back just as I broke free, his eyes widening in surprise and anger. He raised his gun, but before he could fire, the office door burst inward. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, prepared for action. The stranger acted swiftly, and my would-be captor fell before he could pull his trigger. In the sudden silence that followed, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the distant sounds of combat. "Charlotte Hayes?" the man asked, holstering his weapon and stepping fully into the light. His voice carried authority wrapped in unexpected softness, like velvet over steel. His eyes, stormy blue-gray, assessed me with calculating efficiency. "Yes," I whispered, still clutching the letter opener like a lifeline. "How do you know my name?" My hand trembled as adrenaline surged through my system, making the room spin in nauseating circles around me. He moved with practiced grace, removing his suit jacket and draping it over my shoulders in one fluid motion. "My name is Dominic Frost," he said, producing a small knife to cut away the remnants of my restraints. "And I've been tracking the Petrov family for months." The warmth of his jacket enveloped me, carrying the scent of expensive cologne and something darker, gunpowder and danger. A shudder ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold, as I realized I'd traded one unknown situation for another. "Can you walk?" he asked, already guiding me toward the door with a hand at the small of my back. "My men have secured the perimeter, but we need to move quickly." The touch was steady, professional, yet electricity sparked where his fingers met my spine. We emerged into the warehouse's main space, now transformed into something from a war zone. Signs of a struggle were evident across the concrete floor, and the metallic scent of blood hung heavy in the air. Men in tactical gear nodded deferentially as Dominic passed. "Sir, the building is secure," reported a man with military short hair and a jagged scar across his jawline. "We found documentation in the office. Looks like they were planning to auction her off tomorrow if the ransom fell through." Dominic's expression darkened at this news, his jaw tightening with controlled fury. "Get everything back to headquarters for analysis. I want to know exactly how deep Petrov's operation goes, and who was on their buyer list." Outside, the night air hit my lungs like salvation, clean and cool after the warehouse's suffocating atmosphere. A sleek black Mercedes idled at the curb, its windows tinted to impenetrable darkness. Dominic opened the rear door, gesturing me inside with gentlemanly precision. "Why are you helping me?" I asked as he slid into the seat beside me, signaling the driver with a subtle nod. "Who are you, really?" The luxury interior of the car felt surreal after the warehouse's brutal simplicity, like stepping from a nightmare directly into a dream. Dominic studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim interior lighting. "Let's just say your father and I had unfinished business," he finally answered, his words careful and measured. "And I don't appreciate the Petrov family poaching from my territory." I awoke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, momentarily disoriented by silk sheets and a mattress that felt like floating on a cloud. For one blissful moment, I thought the kidnapping had been a nightmare, until I shifted and felt the raw abrasions on my wrists where the zip ties had cut into my skin. The room around me was the epitome of luxury, tasteful artwork on the walls, mahogany furniture that gleamed with careful polishing, and through the windows, manicured gardens that stretched toward distant iron gates. This was no hospital or hotel. The personal touches were too evident, the security too obvious. A soft knock preceded the entrance of a woman in her 50s, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled into an elegant chignon. "Good morning, Miss Hayes," she said, setting down a tray with tea and toast. "Mr. Frost asked me to check on you when you woke." "Where am I exactly?" I asked, accepting the steaming cup with hands that still trembled slightly. The tea was perfectly brewed, the china delicate beneath my fingers, nothing like the chipped mugs I used in my apartment. "How long have I been asleep?" "This is Mr. Frost's private residence in Brookline," she replied, moving to open the curtains wider. "I'm Mrs. Bennett, the housekeeper. You've been asleep for nearly 14 hours. The doctor said your body needed the rest after your ordeal." The mention of a doctor made me glance down, noticing for the first time that my cuts had been cleaned and bandaged, and I was wearing silk pajamas that certainly weren't mine. The thought of being undressed while unconscious sent heat flooding to my cheeks. Your clothes were being cleaned, but I've left some items in the wardrobe that should fit you, Mrs. Bennet continued, gesturing to a massive armoire against the far wall. Mr. Frost will see you in the study when you're ready. No rush. After she left, I explored the attached bathroom, marveling at marble surfaces, and a shower with more settings than I knew what to do with. The hot water felt miraculous against my skin, washing away the warehouse's lingering traces, and revealing bruises I hadn't realized I'd acquired. The wardrobe contained clothing in exactly my size. Jeans, sweaters, even underwear still in packaging from brands I recognized from magazine ads, but had never been able to afford on a barista's salary. How did Dominic know my measurements? How long had he been watching me? Dressed in borrowed finery, I followed Mrs. Bennet's directions through corridors adorned with artwork that looked museum-worthy. The house was silent except for our footsteps on polished hardwood, but I sensed the presence of others. Security personnel stationed discreetly throughout the property. I paused outside the study door, gathering courage before knocking softly. Dominic's deep voice beckoned me inside, and I entered a space that seemed to encapsulate the man himself, powerful, elegant, with dangerous undercurrents beneath the civilized veneer. Dominic stood by a wall of windows, silhouetted against the morning light, a phone to his ear. He ended the call as I entered, turning to assess me with those storm cloud eyes. "Charlotte," he said, my name carrying unexpected weight on his tongue. "How are you feeling?" "Confused," I answered honestly, remaining near the door while he gestured toward a leather armchair. "You know things about my father that I don't. You have men who execute military-style operations, and you're clearly wealthy enough to maintain what looks like a small army. Who are you really, Mr. Frost?" A small smile played at the corner of his mouth as he poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. "I told you. I build things. Create stability where there was none before," he said, offering me one of the glasses. "Your father understood the value of such arrangements." The whiskey burned a trail down my throat, warming me from the inside out. "My father was a literature professor who specialized in Russian poetry," I countered, setting the glass down with more force than necessary. "He graded papers on weekends and drove me to piano lessons in a car held together with duct tape." Dominic moved to his desk, withdrawing a manila folder thick with documents. "Richard Hayes's public life. Yes," he agreed, opening the folder to reveal photographs that made my breath catch. My father in settings I'd never seen, with people I didn't recognize. His private one was considerably more complex. "These are fake," I whispered, though the evidence before me was undeniable. My father's distinctive smile, the scar above his eyebrow from a childhood accident, the way he tilted his head when listening intently. "He couldn't have been. He wasn't. Your father was my intelligence advisor for 6 years, Dominic stated matter-of-factly, as though discussing the weather rather than shattering my entire understanding of my family history. His academic position provided excellent cover for his real expertise, analyzing patterns in Russian organized crime. My mind reeled with implications, memories reshuffling themselves like cards in a deck, the late-night phone calls, unexpected business trips, the languages he spoke that he never taught me. Then the people who took me. "They knew about his work with you?" Dominic's expression darkened, jaw tightening with controlled anger. "The Petrov family discovered his connection to my organization shortly before his death. We believed the threat died with him. Evidently, we were wrong. Through the windows, I could see men patrolling the grounds, their movements synchronized and professional. Not servants or groundskeepers, but soldiers in disguise. These people killed my father, didn't they?" I asked, already knowing the answer in my bones. "The cancer diagnosis was real," Dominic clarified, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. "But its sudden acceleration was not. By the time we suspected poison, it was too late for intervention. I'm sorry, Charlotte. I should have protected him better." The ground seemed to shift beneath me, grief reopening like a physical wound. "And now they're after me because... what? Revenge? Do they think I know something?" The room felt suddenly airless, the luxury suffocating rather than comforting. "Initially revenge, yes," he confirmed, moving closer with that fluid grace that seemed at odds with his powerful frame. "But now it's become something more complicated. You've seen their faces, their operation, and you're under my protection, which makes you valuable in ways you don't yet understand. His proximity sent electricity skittering across my skin despite my turmoil, his cologne teasing my senses. "What does that mean?" "Your protection," I asked, forcing myself to meet those intense eyes without flinching. "Am I a guest here or a prisoner?" Dominic considered me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "That," he finally said, "depends entirely on what you decide to do with the truth I've just given you. You can't go back to your old life, Charlotte. That path is closed to you now." 3 weeks passed in Dominic's mansion, each day a strange blend of luxury and confinement. Mrs. Bennett taught me to navigate the massive house with its hidden rooms and security protocols, while armed men patrolled the perimeter with military precision. Dominic himself remained an enigma, sometimes absent for days on business I dared not ask about, other times appearing unexpectedly to join me for dinner, or offer books from his extensive library. Our conversations were carefully controlled dances around truth and intention. "You're different than I expected," he remarked one evening as we sat in the garden pavilion, the autumn air crisp around us. "Most people in your situation would be broken by now, crying, begging to leave, attempting escape. You're adapting." I traced the rim of my wineglass, considering his observation. "What choice do I have? My apartment's been cleared out. My job thinks I've moved cross-country. And according to Mrs. Bennett, there's a death certificate with my name on it, circulating through official channels." A ghost of a smile touched his lips as he refilled my glass with practiced precision. "A necessary precaution. The Petrovs believe you died in that warehouse fire. It's safer for everyone if that fiction remains intact." The evening light caught the silver at his temples, softening the hard edges of his features. At 27, Dominic carried himself with the weary authority of someone who'd seen too much, done too much, to maintain any illusions about the world. "You never talk about yourself," I observed, emboldened by wine and the strange intimacy that had developed between us. "You know everything about me, my favorite books, how I take my coffee, even which side of the bed I prefer, but you remain a complete mystery." Something flickered in those storm-gray eyes, surprise, perhaps, that I'd been watching him as carefully as he watched me. "What would you like to know, Charlotte?" he asked, my name a caress in his accented voice. "How did someone so young come to control?" I gestured vaguely at our surroundings, the mansion, the guards, the empire I'd glimpsed in fragments. "All of this? You can't be much older than me, yet everyone around here treats you like you're untouchable." Dominic was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. "My father built this organization from nothing. When he was murdered 3 years ago, I inherited his position, his enemies, and his unfinished business, including a debt to your father." The revelation stunned me into silence. This dangerous, powerful man felt he owed my father something. "Is that why you rescued me? To repay a debt to a dead man?" The thought sent an unexpected pain through my chest. "Initially," he admitted, reaching across the table to brush his fingers against the inside of my wrist, tracing the healing marks left by my captivity. "But now my reasons are considerably more complicated." His touch ignited something beneath my skin, a current of electricity that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the magnetic pull I'd been fighting since that first night. "Complicated how?" I whispered, heart thundering against my ribs. Dominic's eyes darkened as he leaned forward, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "I think you know exactly how, Charlotte," he murmured, and when his lips finally met mine, the kiss was both gentle and consuming, a claim and a question all at once. The ringing of Dominic's phone shattered our moment, reality crashing back with brutal efficiency. The transformation was immediate. The man who had kissed me with such unexpected tenderness vanished, replaced by the cold-eyed strategist who commanded an empire built on secrets and blood. "They've found us," he said after a terse conversation, already signaling to the security team that materialized from the shadows. "Petrov's men breached the outer perimeter. We need to move. Now." His hand closed around mine with possessive certainty. The next hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Dominic's men moving with practiced efficiency, gathering essential items, securing escape routes, preparing for confrontation. I watched in fascinated horror as the elegant mansion transformed into a fortress under siege. "How did they find us?" I asked, as Dominic guided me through a hidden passage beneath the library, his body a protective shield between me and whatever threats lurked ahead. "I thought they believed I was dead." His expression hardened, jaw tight with controlled fury. "Someone in my organization has betrayed us. The list of people who knew you were here was extremely short. which makes identifying the traitor my first priority once we're secure. The tunnels opened into an underground garage housing vehicles that looked designed for both luxury and combat. Dominic directed me toward a matte black SUV with windows thick enough to stop bullets. "Get in. Stay down. Where are we going?" I asked, ducking into the passenger seat as commotion erupted somewhere above us. The sound made my blood run cold, memories of the warehouse flooding back with nauseating clarity. "What about your men, Mrs. Bennett? They have their orders and extraction points," he replied, his focus absolute as he navigated the vehicle through a series of underground passages I hadn't known existed. "Right now, my only concern is getting you to safety." We emerged miles from the mansion, the city lights glittering in the distance. Dominic drove with silent intensity, checking mirrors frequently, taking routes so convoluted I lost all sense of direction. "Petrov wants more than revenge now," he finally said, breaking the tense silence. "What does he want?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. The stakes had shifted the moment Dominic claimed me as his own with that kiss. I was no longer just a pawn in their game. I had become the most effective way to wound Dominic Frost. He took a sharp turn onto an unmarked road, the city falling away behind us. "He sent terms while you were changing. You, delivered to him personally, in exchange for a ceasefire between our organizations. A clean trade, one life for hundreds." Cold fear washed through me, but with it came a strange clarity. "You're considering it, not a question." The strategic calculus was written in the tight line of his shoulders, the careful neutrality of his voice. The logical choice would be to trade me. Dominic's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The logical choice, yes. I built this organization on logical choices, Charlotte. Hard decisions that protect the many at the cost of the few. It's how I've survived. How we've all survived. We pulled into a secluded cabin nestled against dense forest, the structure deceptively rustic. I had no doubt it was as fortified as the mansion had been. Inside, the simplicity continued. Functional furniture, minimal decoration, nothing to indicate the wealth Dominic commanded. "So why haven't you already handed me over?" I asked when he returned from securing the perimeter, his weapon holstered but still visible against his side. "If I'm just a liability, a complication in your business affairs, why risk everything to protect me?" Dominic crossed the room with predatory grace, backing me against the wall with his body so close I could feel the heat of him, see the conflict raging in those storm cloud eyes. "Because there are some things logic can't account for, Charlotte. Some weaknesses even I can't overcome." His confession hung in the air between us, weighted with implications neither of us was prepared to voice. "So what happens now?" I whispered, hands rising instinctively to rest against his chest, feeling the thunderous beat of his heart beneath my fingers. "Now we end this," Dominic said, his voice carrying a finality that sent shivers down my spine. "Petrov has pushed too far, threatened what's mine. I won't allow it to continue." The possessive edge in his words should have frightened me. Instead, it ignited something primal and consuming. By dawn, the cabin hummed with activity, as Dominic's most trusted lieutenants arrived in waves, each bringing intelligence, weapons, and the kind of quiet competence that spoke of years navigating violence. I watched from the periphery, a witness to the machine Dominic commanded with such effortless authority. "You don't have to be here for this," he told me privately, his fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with unexpected tenderness. "I can have you taken somewhere remote, somewhere even I wouldn't know to find you. A new identity, a fresh start, away from all of this." The offer hung between us, tempting in its simplicity. I could walk away, become someone new, someone untouched by the darkness that had claimed my father and now threatened to consume me. The old Charlotte would have grabbed that lifeline without hesitation. "And if I don't want to leave?" I challenged, holding his gaze steady despite the dangerous heat building between us. "If I choose to stay, knowing exactly what you are, what this life means." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, followed by a possessive hunger that made my breath catch. "Then you accept everything that comes with it. The danger, the necessary violence, the fact that once you're truly mine, Charlotte, I will never let you go." His words should have sounded like a threat. Instead, they felt like a promise, an anchor in the chaos my life had become. "I've spent 19 years playing by the rules, Dominic. Where did it get me? A dead-end job, crushing student debt, and eventually kidnapped by the same people who killed my father. The plan came together with military precision, a calculated trap using me as willing bait. Dominic's forces positioned strategically throughout the designated meeting point. I memorized my role with the same determination I'd once applied to final exams, understanding that lives depended on my performance. Petrov arrived with an entourage of guards, his cold eyes assessing me with the clinical detachment of someone appraising merchandise. So Frost's pet has decided to save his organization at the cost of her own life. How unexpectedly noble. I smiled, channeling the confidence I'd watched Dominic wield like a weapon. Actually, I've decided to save myself at the cost of yours. The signal was subtle, a shifted weight, a glance toward the shadows, but it triggered Dominic's trap with devastating efficiency. What followed was controlled chaos, gunfire, shouts, the precise violence of Dominic's men as they executed the ambush we'd planned together. Through it all, I remained still, protected by the bulletproof vest concealed beneath my clothes, watching as Petrov's empire crumbled around him. When it ended, Dominic stood over Petrov's kneeling form, the man who'd orchestrated my kidnapping, my father's death, and countless other atrocities. "Charlotte," Dominic called softly, never taking his eyes off his captive. "This belongs to you. Your decision." I crossed the warehouse floor, taking the offered object with steady hands. Petrov's eyes widened in genuine fear as I focused with the intensity Dominic had taught me during our preparations. "My father was a good man," I told him quietly. "He deserved a better death than the one you gave him." The sound echoed through the cavernous space, a period at the end of a chapter I hadn't known I was writing. In that moment, Charlotte Hayes, the barista, the scholarship student, the girl who played by rules established by others, ceased to exist entirely. 3 months later, I stood in Dominic's, our penthouse overlooking the Boston skyline, dressed in couture that no longer felt foreign against my skin. The woman reflected in the mirror was both familiar and unrecognizable. Harder eyes, confident posture, the quiet authority that came from standing at Dominic's side as his equal, his partner in all things. Thank you for following my story. If you're enjoying it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is so important for me to continue here.